yearning to play a few rounds of Gwent. That ought to set me straight.
It's Commander's Horn episode 110. Yes, the podcast is already in its 110th year. The Gwent community is bracing for the impact of the first tournament of 2019. Even me, for a lot of players, it's time to train and take notes because the CD Projekt Red Masters Vault's opening up. Once again, Crozyr and Molegion joining me today after this. Welcome, my friends, and good afternoon. It is February 21st. I have in the show notes February 21th. So I stumbled over that. 21st. It is February 21st. Great time for your weekly Gwent podcast. Stumbling over the intro and all things, just as I was telling my guests, hey, everything looks like it's going to be flawless, and then I get bit by the live stream bug and stumble over my words. Crozyr and Molegion, thanks so much for joining me. Crozyr from Team Leviathan, Molegion from Team Aretuza. Thanks so much for being on the podcast, my friends.
It's a pleasure.
Hey,
so
everyone.
it's a pretty big month right now. It's kind of strange because it's a big month, but at the same time, it's not all that important because as far as the season is concerned for like Pro Ladder and qualification, this is the 1 month off I guess people get before Challenger starts mattering and Crown Points start mattering for Challenger, and we start working towards World Masters. So do you think I mean, Crozyr, you stream, Molegion, you keep a pretty good pulse on what's going on in the competitive world. You're both on competitive teams at the moment. Do you feel like this month has been more about relaxing for teams, waiting for this patch, or have you been able to kind of look over the community, see how people are taking in the game now that the Mulligan patch is history, new leaders are in, and a lot of people think that this is a pretty stable meta. Where are you guys right now on the state of the game? Crozyr, I'll pitch that one to you first.
All right, so first of all, I think it has to be said that the community is going in a really good direction, I think. I mean, right now, just like the last couple of days since qualifiers ended, it became a bit slower again. But just during those days in particular, I think you could really see how the people are just, yearning to get that competitive side of things back again. And the game itself, I think, despite some cards like Spears, like Treasure, and like Dragon's Dream, some of it, like I think Atsukov pointed.
We're actually going to talk about that exact
well
tweet.
on...
I have that in the show notes, so we can have a deep discussion about those cards and the cards that he mentioned. It was Spears, Dragon's Dream, and Shoop is what he said. But he's also in the past tweeted delete Trahern, so I know how he feels about that card too. But that was before he was nerfed. Maybe Atsukov likes that card now. Probably not, though. Probably not. But that's definitely under one of the topics. But didn't mean to interrupt you. But no,
I wasn't going into more detail. It was just as a general like idea that the game is in a good place besides those cards, and I'm excited to see where the game's going to go from now.
Molegion, same with you as far as state of Gwent. Actually, I'll throw the. I do want to ask you guys obviously about yourselves as well. But Molegion, you've been on the podcast before. You've been at Gwent Open before. People have had a chance to get to know you, but you were a really strong voice during that homecoming period in October, where I think there was a lot of commentary on what people expected from homecoming and what we received, and immediate comparisons to vintage Gwent, and then immediate comparisons to other games that were coming out at that time. But you were making sure that you were on Twitter trying to get the word out. Look at this with fresh eyes. This isn't a game that's just, it's not simple. It's not about damage and boost. And you wanted to make sure that people knew the most unique cards in the game, the cards that you saw in the PTR that you had the most interest in, stuff like Lippy at the time, Glusty Warp. So from then to now, because at that point you were being positive and you were being optimistic, but the game, I think we can all agree, is much better now. So it was an uphill climb, I think. So from then to now, Molegion, how has relearning the game felt, and kind of getting up to pro level after the transition? Because it's been a while now.
Okay, starting from the beginning, the thing I did, the thing you mentioned is I was tweeting 5 cards every day that I found very interesting, and because one of the like I was a little bit overwhelmed by the negativity in social media, on Reddit, on Twitter, and one of the arguments was that cards are boring. So I thought that hey, the cards are not actually boring. So I posted some of those cards. I think back then I thought that the key to enjoy Homecoming and to understand it is to realize that deck building is not all about building your decks around your bronze cards anymore. So gold cards have the priority. They are not complementary anymore. They are the core of your deck, and that's probably what helped me to understand it a little bit more. And I felt like the community needs a little bit of positivity, and I was looking forward to the future. And as you said, the game only became better and better with artifact nerfs, with Mulligan update. Mulligan update was the big point in Gwent's history, the best update we had so far in Homecoming for sure. Then we get Thronebreaker leader, so everything is getting better and better, and hopefully it will be just like the expansion will be even better when it finally goes live. And I think that there's exciting future in front of Gwent, and I'm glad that my positivity I wasn't wrong being positive about the game. And talking about how I was relearning the game, one thing that I never really agreed with is that Gwent Homecoming is a completely new game, and I never felt like it. I mean, at first, when I saw it at first, I thought like, okay, Gwent is completely different now. I have no idea what to do. The old pro players might, fall behind. Maybe we'll get new people to the pro scene.
Wow.
But I think in general the game is very, very similar. You didn't have to learn a lot to go to the top. I felt pretty like the learning curve was actually quite similar, quite easy to what happened after every other patch during Vintage Gwent.
You think that it was as easy, if not easier, to adjust to Homecoming than it was to adjust to, let's say, Midwinter?
Maybe not easier, but in general, I think it was as easy because, of course, there were some fundamental changes to the game, like the hand limit, the new Mulligan system, but it wasn't that big of a deal. Like, in the end, Gwent is still about winning 2 rounds, about not giving up card advantage, about managing your resources. Those things didn't really change. What changed was deck building, though, and for that I can confirm that. I mean, I've never been a good deck builder, and I wasn't a good deck builder at the beginning of Homecoming either, so that wasn't my advantage. But I'm not sure if deck building got easier or harder, but I surely enjoy it just more. I do it slightly better now, and that was probably when I learned the most. Other than that, the game feels very similar.
This actually went I was going to expand on this topic as well, a little bit more about tournament preparation, but also about kind of like the way you said it, the way that the learning curve wasn't as steep for you, and you didn't feel like it was a huge transition. Crozier, because for me, I feel like I'm actually I'm really putting in like a ton of time right now, and I'm actually going to take I'm taking a little hiatus from like heavily putting like anything else but Gwent in my time slots right now, because it's just I need to play like a large volume of games, because I feel like I'm still learning a little bit, because even though because I'm still pushing my way up into pro rank, I never made the time commitment, and I know that the game is still like very different at pro rank, even very, very different. It probably ranks 3 to 1. I'm not really sure like where that meta would like starkly shift, if it would even shift before rank 5 or 7. I guess for a lot of people that's the bottleneck rank, but I think that it's definitely now that I'm putting the time into it, it's starting to feel a bit more natural. But at first, I was very jarred. Crozier, did you feel like it was a jarring transition, or do you feel like it was more of a almost seamless transition, as Molegion calmly explained?
So, okay, I think I wouldn't call it a almost seamless transition, especially the first couple of weeks. I mean, I got into it really hyped. I really wanted it to be everything I ever wanted, and I think the first couple of games I was starting to get a bit like irritated. What was going on? Discarding cards with the overdrawing mechanic and all that.
Unfamiliarity.
And like just the way you would have to play around down to like whatever 4 cards or something. In the very beginning, that felt very jarring, and there were times when I was like, oh no, what did they do to this game? But over time, like when you get more practice, when you just get a feel for all these mechanics, I did think that they started to make sense in my head. And when I saw people critique many of these aspects of the game, I mean, some of the criticism was warranted, especially early on, but some other aspects I think people were going a bit far. I felt like many of the people I saw criticizing it, they had the same sentiment I had for my first 10 games or something.
We
like
all
that.
went through it, right?
They didn't keep on playing. Yeah, you got to get through it. You got to get through that transition, and after that, it just at some point it clicks. And I think then, as Molegion said, after that Mulligan update I did, the game like improved vastly. I think if they had released Homecoming and in that post Mulligan patch state right away, then it would have been much more smoother for many people. And I do see your point that you have to readjust to many new mechanics now that the game works this way. I also see Molegion's side that it's the same in some of those core aspects, and it does still feel like Gwent to me. Like if somebody would ask me, "Hey, is Gwent even still Gwent anymore?" and I would definitely say yes, it is. It still gives you that surge of energy if you win by 1 point at the end, and all the things that we used to love about Gwent, in my opinion at least, and I guess that's a subjective
winning by
thing,
1 point I feel like happens a lot more. I don't know. I feel like it happens a lot more. Like ties are more frequent as well.
Points are closer. Yeah, and points are closer together, which opens up to other discussions about Scorch and whatnot. But it's like it still has that feel to me, and I'm pretty optimistic with how things are going, that it's just going to get even better.
Also comments in the chat about Molegion. He's actually 50 years old. It's that Polish spring water. He's not 12 or 10 or what everybody's saying. Oh, Molegion, you said you were 12. Oh, I'm outed. I didn't realize you were the one who said it in the chat that you Oh boy. Wow, that joke went sideways. Guys, I want to keep having a hearty Gwent discussion between the two of you, but I can't get out of the intro here without asking Crozyr, why are potatoes so important to you? Just go. Take this however. He's got a potato in his... Oh, it's the stress potato.
All right.
It's the stress tater.
It's the stress data. Yeah, so the potato thing.
Yeah.
Actually, I have never explained this to anybody ever.
Commander's Horn exclusive. Commander's Horn exclusive. I didn't realize that I had to tease this podcast that I had a Commander's Horn exclusive potato explainer. Go.
Oh God. Okay. So as a kid, I always loved potatoes. It was like my parents always wanted me to eat the vegetables. I just wanted the potatoes. This is actually true. And so I always had a liking to potatoes anyway. And then with Gwent, I just thought this mashed potatoes with thick gravy voice line that the Alba Spearman has was hilarious, and I noticed other people thought that was hilarious too, and like I would quote it every time I hear it, like in any chat. And then when I made my Twitch account, I needed any follower sound, and then at first I only had that one, and I thought I saw that you could have variations of sounds, and because I felt like having only one sound was a bit lame, I think I added like 5 or 6 different potato sounds in the very beginning, first stream, and people just loved it. And I just said, oh yeah, we're the potato pod now. And that's when it all began. It just took off from there.
So just for an example, and I don't even know if this is one of them, because I feel like you can apply this variation to almost every Gwent card, but in Morvran, Voorhees says, if it's peace you desire, prepare for war. Your follow alert might be that, but it says, if it's potatoes you desire, prepare for gravy. But it's like said said in that chopped up way, like with the especially funny with Meave, or basically any higher pitched or female's voice.
Yeah.
Because Meave also has a line that says something like, if it's war you desire, prepare for... It's kind of like the same thing, but it's Maeve's voice
Yeah,
that
yeah.
goes into gravy.
I, I think at this point I've got 140 different.
100.
different
No
lines.
wonder. Okay, because we talked about this before on the podcast, but I was watching your stream. I'm going to transition right through this because I want to talk about the stream qualifiers. So I'm just going to quickly say, everybody, that this episode of Commander's Horn is recorded live on Twitch right here at twitch.tv/McBeard. It will be posted on YouTube, where you can find all Commander's Horn content at youtube.com/c/McBeard on the Commander's Horn playlist. Commander's Horn usually records on Thursdays, start times varying depending on guests, although this 1 p.m. slot is feeling really comfortable. Seems good for the EU guests, seems good for some NA guests as well. So I'd like to continue doing it at this slot. And the podcast is posted on the feed, iTunes, and will be on YouTube no later than Friday. Finally, this episode is brought to you by the Commandos, our patrons at patreon.com/Commander's Horn. So it's not really news. So I'm not really going to transition into news. I just want to talk to you guys because I was watching Crozyr's stream, and he's playing the Metal Gear soundtrack, so it's extra intense. And he's getting a lot of followers because he's streaming the qualifiers for Gwent Open 8 and doing very well. At the time that I tuned in, you were 3-0 or 4-0, I think, on day one. And I was basically, I knew what I was watching for the weekend at that point. And I was just working on YouTube videos and watching that. And I thought I heard over 50 of them, but I don't think, maybe I heard Maeve's twice, but you had so many. So to transition into this conversation, Crozyr, what made you want to stream the qualifiers? You were on delay, but you were streaming it as well. So that adds, I guess, a layer of pressure. Like, no matter what way you slice it, I mean, unless you get some sort of boost or if you get some sort of energy from that, does it not add a little extra layer of pressure? What makes you want to stream the qualifiers?
I think it did both. It was like kind of what I wanted my stream to be from the beginning, in a way. I wanted it to be tense. I wanted it to be atmospheric. That was something I set out to do, actually intentionally. And you can't really do that as intensely on a day-to-day basis, but with an event like this coming up, I felt like I finally had like the opportunity to actually make it an experience that I would want to see in terms of intensity and in terms of this feeling you can root for somebody if all the music that's building up with it, and at the same time I also wanted to be myself, and I think it's just giving like both this kind of boost that you mentioned and also this nervous factor that every misplay people are gonna see, they're gonna comment on in 10
minutes later.
And at the same time, though, every awesome play they're also gonna see and gonna cheer you up for it,
which is usually sometimes even into one of your games. So you're already into another game and you're seeing everybody like super excited that you won the last game. So you get like all the you'll be like, oh, you're reacting to that last play in the last game now, great, but you're like, and you're already into the next game. It was kind of cool to have that dynamic.
And let me tell you, like, usually people sometimes are shy when it comes to backseat gaming because they know streamers don't like it, but when they think, oh, he's on 10 minutes delay, he's never gonna see it.
But then you're actually talking with the chat, though. Then you're actually having like a conversation with the audience. It's kind of like live, like tweeting. Like I used to do that when I watched a lot of baseball. I would be like all over Twitter and Reddit, like talking about the game, but not so much. Obviously, I can't talk to the players, right? So it's like it's more like that. Molegion, correct me if I'm wrong. You have also streamed qualifiers in the past, but you didn't stream this one, did you? Or am I wrong? You've never streamed qualifiers.
I don't think I streamed qualifiers, but I'm not sure at this point. Maybe one of the early ones, long time ago for Challenger, before even Open had its own qualifiers. I did stream. I didn't stream the qualifiers for the same reason that I stopped streaming in general. I just play Wars when I stream. That's as simple as that. I want to play. Yeah, I want to play. I think everybody plays Wars when they stream, unless they have. Maybe if you are a pianist and you have your attention you can focus on multiple things at the same time, then maybe you can stream and play as well as on off stream. But I can't do that. So I thought that there's no reason to give myself like a handicap and play in a disadvantage. So I just decided to play on my own. Nobody's watching. Although I hope that, I mean, I wouldn't feel the pressure of somebody watching me, but I would feel the pressure that I'm responsible for giving like a show, for what's happening on the chat, for the quality of the stream, stuff like that. But I hope that I can stay competitive till the day when qualifiers will be all streamed, officially casted by McBeard and maybe mysterious new caster, and maybe Jaggers and Panda too. All we need for that to be true is the spectators mod, right? I think at some point it will come, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope it will happen. That being said, till it happens, I think guys like Crozyr or Trinet did really good job on showing how exciting competitive Gwent is to the people.
I think that spectator mode, like, it can't be overstated. It can't be overstated. Like, that, how important the spectator mode is for like the game, like the things that even I would be able to do. Like, I would be able to actually like watch other people's games or like cast other people's games. Like, people just send me those videos, like no cutting would be required. Like, just I'm thinking of like just random stuff I could do, or if I wanted to like even host a little tournament, it would be so much easier for people to send their games to me. And like, this is just like, and it's great. Casting practice would be available. Man, I just really will lose my mind if and when we get. Of course, it's got to be an if, right? It's got to be a when. Sorry, it's got to be a when. I think. Crozier, you're about to follow up. I think.
Yeah. Like, I definitely agree. Spectator mode is something I have ever since closed beta, actually, when I started playing. I mean, I was kind of spoiled coming from Dota, actually, back then, which always had like this huge ambition to have like these everyday audiences everywhere. And of course, like, Valve as a games as a service developer itself, like, I guess started that with the ambition to deliver that.
They've always
right
had really
away
good
anyway.
UI stuff.
With
I feel like Valve's UI stuff has always been pretty tight. And MOBAs in general kind of give us that sort of stats on the screen, like observer mode. Like, you have people that are just like straight up directors in those games. Obviously, card games are a little bit different, but even like from a casting desk standpoint, if I had the ability to look at the graveyard, oh man, the sweat that I've had to wipe off my brow, where I'm like, I can't remember what's in the graveyard. And it's like, I'm an authority at that point, and I just can't look at the graveyard. And it's just... Anyway, I don't want to talk about the shortcomings of the tournaments, because we're talking about the excitement of the tournaments, because they are still excitement either way. But I will just, last thing about the streaming conversation, I feel like I'm coming to a realization at the same time that my play is impacted when I stream as well. I have always had a great time streaming. Like, I love hanging out with the community. I'm streaming right now, the podcast. It's obviously different than playing. But like doing great Gwent content has always been like my favorite thing. But when I'm trying to crack through ranks and I'm not playing very well, it takes a lot of the show away, I think, for me, because I know that I'm putting a handicap on myself. Plus, I'm less entertaining if I'm not enjoying myself, because I'm not winning enough, especially if I'm in tryhard mode. And then I feel like, well, if I'm really trying, then why would I give myself this handicap? Oh, because I want to put on a show, but I'm not putting on a good show. And it's like this loop that doesn't really work, because streaming, if I'm playing worse when I'm streaming, I'm not really practicing. But if I'm not streaming, then I have less footage for YouTube. But if I'm working on YouTube, then I'm not playing Gwent. So it's like there are these demands, I think, on being in the Gwent sphere, one way or another. I feel like the candle can only be burned on two ends, and I'm trying three ends right now. So the streaming at the moment, yeah, it's fine. I think I just need to take like a quick hiatus from streaming and just like crush the game for a little while.
Yeah, sometimes the tilt is just too much. I know what you mean. But there's actually one thing I want to follow up on here with what you're saying, that playing while streaming is always having a negative impact on your performance. I hear a lot of people say that, and sometimes that is true for me as well. And I think I can explain in which ways. But what you guys never see is how I play when I'm off screen, which is very much more energetic and tilted. And I tend to be very angry at the game sometimes, and I feel like that's not necessarily something the outside world needs to see. So when I'm on stream, I'm really trying to focus that inner zen energy. So in a way, the streaming actually lowers my tilt, because I'm like, no, I can't smash the table here because because I
I'm
lost
like the
again.
opposite.
And I gotta keep.
I'm the
keep it
opposite.
cool.
I get angry when I'm on stream, but when I'm off stream, I'm just like, well, no one saw me lose, so whatever. On to the next one. Like, it's just like not. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
don't even
I can see
care.
that.
Like I've actually I have. There's so much relief that I'm not being scrutinized that it's like the only person that saw me make either that misplay or lose that game where like a small decision would have made a difference is the person I'm playing against. It's the audience of one, and they don't even get all the information. So yeah.
I see where you're coming from. I guess it's just, I don't know, it's like a personal thing how it affects you. But the one thing that does affect me negatively, and that is something I'm sometimes really struggling with, is that usually when I play Gwent, I play like 3 games at a time, and then don't know, like watch Netflix or something. Like not always, sometimes there's a serious climb, but like oftentimes that's how I casually play Gwent, just a couple of games and then I take a short break. But on stream, you have to stream for like 4, 5, 6, 7 hours on end, and then sometimes after 2 hours, I'm like, yo, I kind of want to take a 15-minute break, but of course streaming, it's not going to work, right? And then, I mean, unless you want to lose your viewership. And so it's like you kind of feel forced into this continuous stream of games that you kind of can't escape from if you want to provide a good stream. And that is really sometimes getting to me. And then I see like after a couple of hours, my performance really drops. And that's when I definitely see the point that playing while streaming is
it's the restrictions it puts on you as a person. Like I can't like sit like with my feet up and like lean back any way I want because I need to be like in front of a microphone. And I've usually been starting my stream like usually around like 11, and I'll take a break at like 1:30. But when I come back, every single stream I've taken the 15-minute break to stretch, let my dog out, maybe have a bite to eat, because I think that that's a healthy thing to do. Viewership unfortunately does decline, but it's a healthy thing to do. But I come back and it doesn't matter. I come back and I'm always worse. Like every single time I'm always worse. Like I feel like I could just stand to have a long, I don't know, like I'm trying to crack the code. Molegion, do you feel, when you feel the pressure, you seem like a very cool customer. Do you ever get, how do you deal with salt, especially when you have to push for pro rank and, push to like the top of the pro ladder, and you actually don't have the luxury of time because you need to just either put in a large volume of games or you're pushing on a deadline and you just can't stop. How do you push through the salt if it even comes up?
Yeah, maybe I look like I stay calm all the time, but I actually get angry at the game a lot. But I think it's normal because I really care about it, right? So it's natural to get salty at times. So the two things I do probably that help me deal with it the most. I mean, maybe 3 things. I will start with the most important one that actually makes people good players is that you need to have the right mindset, right? Sometimes you just can't do anything, so why bother being angry if you couldn't do anything, right? If you manage to control your emotions in moments when you couldn't do anything, I think you are already making a big step forward. And the times when I'm the most angry is this is actually connected to one of the biggest issues I have with Gwent, is, for example, when somebody surprises me with a Dragon's Dream Nivellen combo, and I would surely win that game, but I didn't know he's playing it, so I lost. This is when I get the most angry. And I think that like the other 2 things I wanted to mention at first is that I have people that I can complain to them about how terrible Gwent is for me because I keep getting matched against those Dragon's Dream friends.
And you know exactly, you have a direct line.
To
I was going to say Aretuza, because Ultraman 1996 said the same thing last time when he was on. That Adzikov specifically is, he's teching, am I going to play against him or not? That's really the decision. But you're saying it's Adzikov and who else? Who's the other person who plays Dragon?
Casper. I mean, I'm not saying they are playing Dragon's Dream against me, but they are the people that they're my closest, and Gwent to Town, these 3 are my closest Gwent friends. And whenever something goes wrong, we complain to each other because we can understand each other. And sometimes you just complain a bit, you take a break, and then everything is fine again. It's important to not play when you are tilted. You mentioned that if you want to push for pro ladder rank, you have limited time, so you need to play a lot of games. But you are it's not good to play inefficiently and play when you are tilted, playing when it's not going well. It's much better to take a break, or you end up playing like 1,000 games with one faction, when you could play like 200 of them, right? So I think it's important to not waste time, and knowing your emotions, knowing how to control them, taking breaks will really help you to play efficiently. So that's how I handle it. I take breaks. I talk about my problems with the game with my friends, and I try to stay positive.
See, again, like it's weird that I have this opposite problem where I feel like the things that I can't control are the things that I accept the easiest. But when I make like not a misclick, because that's like a genuine mistake, but like if I make the wrong call, like if I just make an error, a misplay that I know cost me the game, that's when I'm really upset, because I'm mad at myself. Like, I don't get mad at the game because I feel like that's exactly it. I have no control over the game. The game is how it is. If if you guys can do well, then why? Like, I have the same odds of doing well if I make decisions as well. So I know that if I'm the one who's holding myself back, that's like the most critical thing for me. But you did mention Adzikov, you did mention Dragon Stream, so let's actually talk about the game of Gwent here. I want to talk about Adzikov. This tweet, now it's not like super newsworthy, but it is very specific. I feel like he tweeted recently saying that Gwent would be perfect without Spears, Dragon Stream, and Shoop. Actually, was the word he used perfect? I don't want to misquote him. I can't remember. He said the best Gwent ever. Okay, which is, I don't know, that sounds even better, yes. Because that's saying the best Gwent ever is comparing it to, every high point of Gwent right now. And that doesn't seem like a long list. Although, again, Adzikov has also tweeted delete Traherne. So I imagine that he's probably...
Yeah, I think he just forgot about
Well, I think that maybe even just... I think that card is nerfable provision wise. I don't know if the effect, I don't know. Like I understand that the effect dumping a win con is randomly is like infuriating, but he's very Nilfgaardian. I think it's just the coupling of the other tools that Nilfgaard has that makes it really rough. Anyway, how do you feel? Let's start with Crozyr. Talk to me about what you think about these three cards, perhaps Traherne as well. Do you feel like there's any other cards? Do you feel like any of these cards actually aren't a huge problem?
I think I agree with the list as presented, because, I mean, Traherne in particular has been tilting me quite a bit, because usually it feels like Traherne is punishing you for not drawing well, or like not drawing the cards.
That's a really good way to look at it.
And like
that's really good.
Like you're already screwed over because you didn't find the card maybe because you didn't find the card that you need later. I guess it's important around one to have you win condition, but so like it's like you don't have the card and then it's getting taken away from you permanently. It's just like this double screw over, and then it's also random, right? That's the same issue with Shoop. That's the problem with these two cards. It's just off gonna decide a game based on RNG, and you actually have zero impact on this, and somebody who might play way worse than you just wins the game off of that. And I think that is, in general, the problem that most people have with Spears and Dragonstream, which is impossible sometimes to tell if they're going to have those cards. And based on the information, if they're going to have them, you have to adjust your game plan. So you're just rolling the dice. So you happen to have played against that person before, and then you wrote their name down and memorized what they're playing, and then maybe next time you don't do that mistake again. But sometimes you basically have to do a coin flip in your head and say, okay, this guy's going to be Dragonstream and this guy isn't. Sometimes they give it away, but sometimes they just don't. And you just win or lose based on that, and that feels really frustrating when that happens. You basically sometimes lose playing correctly, and that's just feels bad.
I mean, it is tough. I mean, when you think about, I mean, like, I haven't had a chance. I haven't seen a Dragon Stream in a really long time. It like makes me nervous every time like a long period of time goes without seeing it. But it's been a while. I'm also currently running a pretty cool list that Green Knight and Saber threw at me. That's running Ragnarok. It's a Brewer list, and I like Ragnarok because it feels like a Dragon Stream you can just play early instead of something you have to play late. Because sometimes it gets you just as much value. But no one's playing clears. That's the thing. Do you think the Dragon Stream? I'll throw this one to you, Molegion, and of course you can add anything you want about Adzikov's list, but do you think that a world in which weather is stronger thus prompting more clears in the meta. And we're kind of in a situation where Iris isn't a crazy inclusion because there's a lot of artifacts out there right now, and it also is kind of an extra insurance against whether like Dragonstream or Ragnarok, and is also a human for, Usurper or Northern Realms or whatever. So, and a good unit for Thrive. Like you could make a case for it. Unfortunately, 9 is a really good slot. But do you think that the meta could change and Dragonstream doesn't have to change? Or do you think that mechanically, the way Dragonstream works as it passes over to your opponent's turn, the way Nivellen is working, do you think that there just needs to be more of a fundamental change to one of those cards?
I think Dragon's Dream is the wrong one to blame in the Dragon's Dream Nivellen combo, actually. Because Dragon's Dream actually contributes somehow to the health of the game, because it's a card that punishes row stacking, and cards that punish row stacking are good for the game. I think they should be in it. However, the problem is Nivellen, that can basically, like, you can play around Dragon's Dream, but hey, I'm Nivellen, 5 points for 8 provisions. I don't care. I can line up everything, and this card is the problem. I think I would like to see it reworked. It kept its ability from before Homecoming when we still had 3 rows. Technically it still picks a row randomly, but the random row you can choose is like the only one that the units are not in. So it's I think this card is really the problem. I would like to see it completely reworked. I'm not sure how to change it. If you look, for example, at Geralt art, nobody plays this card. It does similar thing, and it's not played because Nivellen is just so much better with cards that are good with art. Like, you don't want to damage units for dragons to lacerate.
So the strength is low enough that it's sometimes always it's against your interest to remove in those situations.
Yeah, I don't want Nivellen to be removed, but I would like it to see it getting reworked. I'm not sure to what. I usually have some idea. When I suggest to rework a card, I usually have some idea how to do it. For Nivellen, I don't know. I don't think picking 3 units would be good to move. I would maybe make it not work with movement, rather with something else instead. Maybe something lore-friendly would be nice. But yeah, overall, I think Dragon's Dream can stay, especially if Weather becomes more popular and people start taking in clears. And you mentioned Iris. I think Iris is a really bad card, because if you want to take against artifact removal, so artifact removal is a completely different topic. But if you want to play 8 points, 8 provisions for artifact removal, that, like, I don't know how often will you face artifacts. At the best, 1 in 4 games, let's say. This is the thing. I mean, I don't know the meta on different ranks, but in pro rank, 1 in 4 games you meet artifacts. Fair enough. That's what I would say.
I've seen a lot of
maybe even rare. Yeah, I mean, it of course depends. People like different things, so it's different. But you pay 8 provisions for that, and if they don't run artifacts or Weather, and you assume they run artifacts or Weather, you play a 5-point card for 8. That card could be like Kimpy Gervin, for example, or Caldwell, or whatever. It could be worth a lot more points, but it's not. So yeah, the Weather removal is pretty bad, I would say. But Weather is bad too. If Weather becomes more popular, Dragon's Dream is of course less of a problem. And if we remove Nivellen completely in the state it is right now, it's I think the Nivellen's Dragon's Dream combo kind of goes away. The cards that's similar to Nivellen and Dragon's Dream are the Mastercrafted Spears, Ajikov also mentioned in his list. And this is part of the biggest problem I have with Gwent at the moment. Like, the thing that I hate the most, and I'm really not looking forward to deal with it at Gwent Open, and I know I will have to deal with that, probably, 90%, is that in Homecoming there's a lot of cards that if you know your opponent is running it, you will easily beat it. But if you don't know your opponent is running it, you will lose to that no matter how well you play quite often. And the good example of card like that was Regis Higher Vampire. It was the extreme example of that, because if you wanted to play around Regis Higher Vampire with, let's say, Harald and Dagur, you had to put dagger in your range throw, and you lose 8 points to not give your opponent 17 or
just
whatever.
as a reminder to everybody.
Like you actually had to sacrifice a lot. Yeah, exactly.
Just want to say, just as a reminder, Regis Hire Vampire, which you may not have seen in a while, was the card that basically drains the boost, like old Unseen Elder used to do. Drains the boost off of a target and, you know, switches it to you. So in a situation like Dagger, it's a swing of like 20 points or more. Yeah.
Yeah. The more points you get, the more points you actually lose. Yeah. That was the problem. So I'm glad this card got. And Spears and Dragon's Dream are the same thing. If you know your opponent is running it, you can play around it by bleeding round 2. You can play around it by, I don't know. For Dragon's Dream, you can do a nice trick. You can pass with 2 cards in hand if you won round 1, and the Dragon's Dream will never go off. Yeah, Spears is another card like that, and you know, sometimes you will assume your opponent has Spear and you will keep your Bomb Heaver in hand, but your opponent didn't play Spear, so you will play a 3-point card and you will lose by 1. That's pretty frustrating. And well, I think it's much bigger problem in Homecoming than it was in previous Gwent, because the points are generally lower.
It's easier to come back.
So those cards are way more impactful. For a good example of when it really hurts is, for example, during the Gwent Open qualifier round 1, for some reason, I'm not sure why, round 1 we played with closed deck list. We didn't know what the opponent is facing. And in round 3,
like the very first series, you mean? Because later in the day you had it, right?
Yes, the very first series in Swiss.
I didn't know that. I thought you had it from the very start.
Only
from game 2.
Yeah, we were a bit confused. I have no idea what was that supposed to achieve, but that was the rule. I hope that will change in future. I believe it will get changed. But in round, I was facing a guy who was playing Morvran with Ragnarok and Dragon's Dream. I opened this deck list and I was like, wow, why would you bring this to this tournament? Who was the poor soul who had to face him in round 1? I checked, it was Saber, and he lost to him, and well, I can't blame him. He had no idea that the opponent brought something like that. And that's the problem. You can lose to anyone because they will surprise you with a huge combo like Dragon's Dream is. And sadly, I believe that's also the case for quarterfinals at Gwent Open, that the decklists are still closed. I mean, maybe it got changed. I don't know. Last time when I was at Gwent Open, we didn't know what the opponent is playing.
Never known on day 1. In any of the current in any tournaments that have passed, no deck lists were known on day 1.
I mean, I knew because I was preparing with.
Well,
Demorx,
yeah,
but,
you know, Demorx, I guess.
But that's a different case. And yeah, basically, what that leads to is that you can you can be a better player, play better, and still lose because you get surprised. So I'm not a big fan of that. I think that the issue can be partially solved by, first of all, removing the toxic combos, or the cards like Regis, Spear. Regis was changed in a nice way. I think it will come back at some point, but for now it hurts a little bit less. So Regis, Dragon's Dream, Nivelle, and stuff like that. If it gets changed, it will get better. And for tournaments, when it matters the most, I think, because one game you lose is actually a lot of games. In the best of 5 series, for example, if you could play with open deck lists all the time, that also solves the issue a little bit. But of course, you could make an argument that it's worse for viewers. I think that's the argument CDPR makes for having closed deck lists in round 1, that it will, if you have open deck lists, players won't bring interesting tech cards, stuff like that.
But you kind of run a risk by doing that anyway, because if you bring those tech cards, your opponents do know that on the second day, so they could just play around it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I don't understand. You get punished, you get rewarded for not playing to win the tournament. You get rewarded for bringing a lineup directed to win one round. So I'm not very happy about that. And I want to believe that that's not what the viewers want, because in reality what it means is that the viewers don't mind seeing someone's 2 months of work getting completely wasted because they got matched against Dragon's Dream and they didn't know. But yeah, I don't know. I'm curious how CDPR will approach this. I think this is the biggest issue Gwent has right now, that the surprise factor is too important. Playing around cards is not as easy as it was before. You can't play around Igni and Scorch as easily as before, because you have to sacrifice way more points because of the nature of those cards. As for Shoop, I'm talking a lot, I know. As for Shoop, Shoop was quite popular in the qualifier, right?
Green Knight also
I still don't
Shoop.
believe Shoop is a good card. I think everyone was running Shoop, which is also part of the reason why Shoop did so well in the end, because a lot of people were playing Shoop, so one of them had to do it. The problem with Shoop is similar. I mean, you probably know the opponent has Shoop because of the cards they play.
It's a bit more clear, yeah.
But you have no idea what to expect, and Shoop is just a way for a worse player to beat a better player. So I don't like that, of course.
That's one way to look at it. I mean, Crozyr, you saw it in one of your games. I remember a Shoop was played. I can't remember. I think it might have actually been the game against Green Knight where Shoop was played on Hunter played on an empty board. And if you don't know, everybody who's listening, the effects, most of the effects require something on the opponent's side of the board. But one of them is hand buff, and it's 1 or 2 buff in the hand. And Green Knight got hand buff and also got like +2 on almost everything.
Oh yeah, it was a pretty close series. So I lost the first game to Green Knight. Both of us were unbeaten at that point. So that was my first loss in the series. And then the second game I managed to win. So it was down to the last game in that series. And I was a card up in round 3 as Krach Horn. So against Morvran, Shoop. And I would have been in a really good spot. So Green Knight did the only thing that he could to win this still. So he did the correct thing by playing Shoop on an empty board. Because if he still gets the hand buff and gets a massive one, then he can still easily beat me a card down. And that's exactly what happened, right? He got the 60% high roll. Got actually +2 on every single card in his hand. And just whopped me, which is like I didn't stand a chance.
The Zen moments you were talking about, like the moments in which you're trying to keep it cool for the audience. I think that was maybe one of them where you're like, I'm just not. It's just funny, I'm just not. It's fine. It's just a funny thing that happened, and inside you, I can hear it.
Yeah, sometimes that's not that easy to handle. But at the same time, it's still important to notice that he played to win. He followed the winning line. Even though he got there with the help of RNG, it doesn't matter that doesn't mean that he didn't play that right or anything. And there's actually one card. I'm not sure if we have time for this still. There's one card I would like to mention as well as an honorable mention of things that might want to be changed for the future. And this is a card that's very dear to me actually. I've been using myself to the dismay of many of my opponents, which is the Slizzard.
The Slizzard.
I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this, but if you Aretuza the Slizzard in round 3. Then you can just eat your entire board, and all the control in the opponent's hand is bricked. And if they don't have Scorch or Yrden or some trick with Shoop or whatever card like Riot Brigade, they can kill your Slizzard before it grows, after it grows, and they just lose. And the thing is, I think many people find it very frustrating. The word binary is being used quite a lot. If you play this deck quite a bit, you can figure out that there's still a lot of decision making. Sometimes there's a lot of decision making for this Lizard player, and there's ways for him to lose and to win. But I do see how people would want that to be changed, because it just feels extremely bad to play. It's like Artifacts but worse, right? You play against an opponent that you can't touch at all. Like you can do nothing, and then you just play 5 bricks, and it's like Mimic mode. It's like you have no fun with the game, and then. And then the way I think they could fix this though, because it's kind of not sure if they have to fix Lizard. I think the problem with the deck right now, with this deck, why it's so strong, is that even if they give up round 1 and you have the opportunity to bleed them round 2, Monsters as a whole just is a bit overtuned right now with their, not just with their bronze cards, but also with their big boys. They just feel really strong and overwhelming, especially if you try to bleed them in round 2. So with Lizard, it's very common to pass round 1 and they try to get that Aretuza use out of you, or you Slizzard or whatever, like you win con, and they just can't. And then you go into round 3, you don't even have to use the Slizzards anymore, you just win points. And if they nerf monsters as a whole, I think the Slizzard thing might be much more under control.
first of all, I just want to quickly say that I think the thing that I agree with Molegion saying that Nivelin as being the thing you can't react to being a huge problem. And I also think that Nivelin, like, it's okay for there to be a neutral card that moves. And we do have the Straves of Spala and Rock Barrage, I guess, if you want to count that. But and Geraldard, right? But you also, for that card to be the best card and for it to move everything and for every class to have access to that, it not only makes the combo very strong, but also makes it homogenizes, I guess. It's like you're not playing against decks anymore. You're playing against specific combos. And that combo can come disguised as any leader, which is... It's great to play around stuff. It's great to like see your matchup and make your mulligans accordingly. But for very strong neutral combos to be present at the highest level of play, even, which means it's obviously present at other levels of play, especially as stompy as it is. Like if you can't, it's really hard to beat it when you don't know it's coming. And I imagine the lower and lower you go, the better you are to dupe somebody into playing into that. So there's that part. But I also wanted to mention something else, but I have now forgotten what that is. How about that? And I can't remember, but it was about monsters. The question is, for both of you. So Crackhorn Crate Horn is a very popular Skellige deck. I have seen a Scorch variant, and I am assuming that this variant is not popular at the highest level of play, because it seems like if that would be a popular variant, then monsters as a whole would be affected, but also this specific Aretuza deck would be specifically targeted. Is it not really a thing? Or, and have either of you played Crackhorn? Have you been able to have strong matchups against Aretuza Slizzard if you have? Or, sorry, not Crackhorn, Crack Scorch. And also, as we are coming up to the end of the hour, I just want to check how you guys are for time, because we can answer this question, but we'll move on to the chat after this part, I think. So I'll pitch that one to whoever. Molegion, do you feel like Crack Scorch is at all competitive, considering how many tall strategies are out there?
Okay, I will start by answering your question regarding the time. I have some more time, so if Crozyr can stay around, then okay. So Scorch and Horn both cost 14 provisions. And that's the good thing to start at. So you could play both technically, like Game King did at some point of the season. I don't think it's a great idea, but you can play both. But but assuming you have to pick one. So the strength of Scorch is that the ceiling is way higher. So if your opponent doesn't know you're running Scorch, you can get a lot of points. Or if you get matched against Lizard, you can get a lot of points. But at the same time, the floor is also way lower. And for example, Scorch is completely useless, I think, against Skellige in general. If you have to face a different Skellige player, you are very unlikely to get more than 10 points. And if you get 10 points, it's not even that great for 14 provisions. So Horn is just a more consistent way of actually getting points per provision. And if you value consistency over like the high roll potential or the ceiling potential, then Horn is probably just the better way to go for. Some people do play Scorch, and you always have to keep in mind that they might have the Scorch if you are facing a crack. But it usually doesn't even hurt that much because, for example, let's take a look at some popular decks in the meta. Morvran doesn't really care. You can, if you are not cautious, you can play like Serried Ox, Slave Infantry or something, have a lot of 5s on board and get scorched for a lot of points. But you have 3 charges on your leader, so... And, you can buff something up and Crack can't ping it down to line up Scorch again. So it's quite easy to play around it. Scorch is not really a threat to Nilfgaard. Scorch is not a threat to Skellige. Scorch is a slight threat to monsters, but a smart monsters player will play around it too, and you will probably get like... I don't know, sometimes you will get 20 points, let's say. Assuming big monsters, of course, not Slizzard. For Slizzard, it's just game winning, but it's a little bit different story. So, Scorch is really inconsistent card. That's why I think it sees less play. However, I do believe it has potential in the crack list. It's of course better if you run Mastercraft.
Oh yeah,
Spears.
I assume that you're running Spears and Croc in this list, in this Scorch list. So
Yeah, some people didn't, but you can run spears. Although if you lay a spear down on the board, you are telling your opponent, hey, I'm probably playing, so this is also, counterintuitive, but maybe it's sometimes better to not have spears on ladder to make your opponent, not let your opponent know that you can have Scorch. But in the end, I think that what matters really is just the consistency and the floor that Horn has. Horn is only really weak in a really short round, so if you lose round 1 and get bled, you might not get value from it, but you have Harald Houndstooth, for example.
Yeah.
To get a lot of value from him. So yeah, it's just more consistent, and I think that's why it's more play.
That's just perfect. You summed it up. That answers my question for sure. And I think it was really good to compare them as a provision point. They share a slot, you could say. So I think that in general, though, I just love that we're actually, like, the way we're talking about the game, though, is really interesting. How, Scorch is detrimental against a deck that is very threatening to a bunch of other decks, but to play that, you are weak to decks that don't care about it. And, that's obviously meta stuff. That's very common card game meta stuff. But I think this comes back to the deck building change, that I feel like the conversations weren't as rich, I think, because swapping a silver for a silver or a gold for a gold in a lot of cases was a lot less interesting, because as refinement went down, I feel like when you were teching in certain stuff, it mattered a lot less if you were just getting max value on your bronzes or max value on your golds and silvers and just playing purely for value. But in this version of Gwent, it feels like the turns can be so much swingier, and the deck building is more surprising, but it's almost like just bringing it all back to Adzakov's tweet about how Spears, Dragon's Dream, and Shoop are cards that are dangerous for the game. Although I think that we've maybe said that Nivellen is probably worse, but specifically that combination, where the surprise factor is keeping the game from being, in Adzakov's quote, the best Gwen ever. However, you also still want to be able to play specific combos and strategies that work against some things, but maybe are weak against other things. So it's obviously very difficult. This is what the balanced team thinks about at night, obviously. Like, this is what we want to be able to have the deepest conversations about this and actually think, something should never be the best. But it feels like it's not a deck or a leader that we're talking about being extremely oppressive, except for Aretuza in this specific context. But generally, we're talking more about combos. We're talking about decks with very high provision caps that can run the very strong neutrals that most decks are running, like Unicorn Kyrenax, like Roach and Witchers. So instead of talking about factions and leaders, we're talking more about combos because of the neutrals. And I think that the new expansion will completely change this conversation for the best, because I think that the constant conversation, even through all the nerfs and all the fixes and all the ways that Gwent has gotten better over the months, is that neutrals being too strong is generally detrimental for the game. Although I do like how they changed Unicorn Kyrenax, but it is still a combo that everybody's playing, so you do see it all the time. And the meta, they kind of play into each other, using Kyrenax to move their Unicorn or their Kyrenax, using your Blue Dream to take back their Unicorn Kyrenax. Like, it's just, that's what happens to the games. They become very, very similar. So I feel like for the game to be very good as it is right now, and to know that this probably we're gonna break this trend, is promising. I think that's really promising. Let me know in the chat if you guys agree, or if you guys disagree with anything that Crozyr or Molegion have shared with us today. And I have a question for them leading into this community section, but I do want to know what you guys are thinking as well. So questions in the chat at McBearded. And we'll be right back after this break. Once again, we are supported by our commandos. Our patrons at patreon.com/commandershorn. So my first question to you guys is a question for both of you. Recently, I think I saw this in Crozier's chat during the qualifiers. Demorcus recently expressed a really cool sentiment, and it was the spirit of this sentiment was that because we're seeing TLG surge, we're seeing Ultraman and Green Knight be in the qualifiers. We've seen be in the Gwent Open. We've seen Radu Andrade be in the Open. We've seen a number of TLG members also get through the qualifiers to day 2, like yourself, Crozyr. So TLG is now being seen in the competitive scene, whereas previously this was Team Complexity, which now the only player is Freddy Babes, as well as Colomon's kind of on his own island with CCG, and Gwenelman is long gone. So there's not really the same landscape. However, we are seeing more homegrown teams, and I'm wondering if you guys agree with the sentiment that that the competition, and there's healthy rivalries between let's say Team Aretuza and TLG, as these are both kind of homegrown Gwent teams. So do you think this landscape of homegrown teams is more interesting than something like tuning into your favorite game and seeing your household teams like Team Liquid or TSM being involved? Do you think that there's more community pride that can be based around that? I'll throw that to Crozyr first.
Oh yeah, I think I can definitely agree with it. It's just nice to see like all these familiar faces really trying to get places in the tournaments, and to see people that you really know and that you root for like that, and that you might have known even before they became bigger, to see like what places they can go to, and also the way the teams are trying to support the community in ways like with meta snapshots and guides and all that. It's not just benefiting the pro players, that they have a team that they can rely on, which is always also a huge factor for every like aspiring player who wants to get better, having that support from the teams. But also the entire community that's like benefiting from this, and as you say, like a healthy rivalry. I think that's really a good way to put it, because of course we all do to try to do our best, but at the same time I think there's also a lot of mutual respect there, and I'm hopeful and optimistic that that's gonna keep on being the case for the future as we continue to head for like the Gwent Opens, the Challenges, even the Masters, and whatever may come beyond.
Beyond. The future is a very exciting and large place. But the near future is even more exciting because of the 3 events that you just talked about, the Open, the Challenger, and the World Master, which is a promise that was made a long time ago. And it is about to come to fruition in a form that maybe we didn't expect, but it's pretty exciting right now. Molegion, did you have any sentiment to express regarding that last question before I jump into the chat?
Yeah, I think it's great to have some teams that were both in Gwent, but of course neither Aretuza or Team Leviathan have structures like Liquid or TSM or Complexity, sponsorship, stuff like that. So that of course keeps some things down. However, I think it's really great to have a group of passionate players that there's also healthy rivalry between them. I think it's really nice, and it might add some, maybe, who knows, maybe some spice to games on Gwent Open. I wouldn't mind facing Alessio at all. I think it would be nice.
I think it would be nice. Wow, probably the first person I mean I've played against. I've scrimmed with Alessio before, like when I was doing the Gwent skirmish for the streamers. By the way, that was a streamed tournament that I was like part of, and if I didn't do well against Crozyr in that first game, I probably would have been like devastated to go into the second one. So I felt the pressure on that live tournament. But I scrimmed with him. He's just so damn good. He's such a good player. Not that you are not a good player, and I definitely would like to see.
Yeah,
everybody's good. Yes, and I would like to see that clash. I'd like to see. I mean, what we really want, obviously, is a bracket that can be interesting no matter which way you cut it. You have teammates against each other. You have the rivalries. You have, like you're saying, sponsored Pretty Babes Complexity. You can look at him like he's a bigger presence. Also, he's the Gwent Open number 7 winner and Gwent Challenger 2 winner. So he also comes with his own presence as well. So as a broadcaster, I have always loved narrative. And I think that that's something that Gwent was missing in the first couple of tournaments because no one really knew who people were. That's why it was really important that Life Coach was a part of it. Like, someone who had a lot of lore kind of coming into it, like people knew who he was, and maybe Super JJ and stuff like that. So now that everybody knows who the pros, you look at the pro ladder, a lot of familiar names. So people who have been watching competitive Gwent in the past shouldn't be surprised to see the people that are still playing and doing very, very well, which is a good thing for, it's a good testament to skill, especially when you see Coleman's win rate. And it's also a good testament to, I think, the taste of these really, really, really smart card players sticking with Gwent when it's only getting more interesting. Brazar asks in the chat, may bigger card pools solve some problems with popular combos? I did say that before we jumped into the community section, so I will just reiterate, yes, I think we can all agree that combos changing, obviously meta's changing, different things becoming viable, certain things not becoming viable, obviously. Anything that shakes up the meta and adding cards is one of the biggest things to do. Gulo X2 in the chat recently qualified for Pro Ladder. Congratulations to Gulo. And he's asking two Pro Ladder players here, two very high level Pro Ladder players, as seasoned veterans, what tips would you give to a new Pro Ladder player? I guess in Gulo's situation, trying to break into the top 500 to not lose that Pro Ladder slot. So you're playing against people like, as Crozier's tossing the stress ball, maybe indicating some foreshadowing on what his answer might be. So how do you deal in the new environment of Pro Ladder once you start getting matched up against people like Molegion and Crozyr?
Yeah, so I actually used to be quite stressed out when I started, getting into Pro Ladder, started being paired against all these big names, and that was something that I was so intimidated. And at some point, I think you just have to realize that this, like the what Molegion said earlier, like the mindset you have when going to these games is extremely important. That's also something you got to keep in mind for Pro Ladder, where there's a lot of people who have that mindset. You're just gonna be calm no matter whom they're playing, and just gonna look from play to play, and who are not gonna let themselves be intimidated by anybody. And that's kind of, I think, what you got to try to aspire, trying to figure out, to realize there's gonna be a game after this one. There's gonna be 2 or 3 games after this one where you can, try to do better. And exactly what this entire idea of like tilt makes so important is, like, sometimes I think when you tilt it and play, it's like, might as well play when you're drunk. You can make so many more mistakes. It's like it's I think the most important thing. And also I think when it comes to like deciding which decks to bring when you're really, really try harding and want to get the good scores and whatever, and this is maybe actually, I don't want to bring this up too much, but something that's a bit annoying right now for me about the way Pro Ladder works, and we don't have the normal rank ladder anymore, that you're kind of really inclined to bring decks that are really consistent, that work, like in most matchups, like bring the A game, try to figure out what the best decks are right now. Try out the different net decks, and not just to net deck yourself, but to actually figure out how they work, to get a sense for them, and to like get used to what they want to achieve in a game, so you can play around that. Like, really get yourself in the meta and that mindset. And if it's winning what you're after, then maybe the memes are not always the way to go, and some consistent tier 1 stuff is
as fun as surprises are. There are obviously lots of situations where you can get played around, or just straight up beaten. Molegion, what would you say as far as changing your play style, going up against basically probably with the viewpoint that you're going to be facing only tier 1 decks? There's not going to be a lot of, there might be some surprises, but there wouldn't be a lot of like complete unknown things, I guess, unless I'm wrong and there are lots of unknown things.
Oh,
I
would
probably would be surprised.
Especially after they removed the deranking in regular ladder. People who don't really care too much, they like playing a lot of different things you would never expect. Like, I can't think of anything right now, but I faced a funny Hansel deck with every single artifact in the game. Wow. I had a lot of.
I know Trinet was playing a Henselt artifact list, but that was a while ago, I think, that he posted about that. So I don't know how popular that was.
But yeah, the truth is, people will most likely play good decks, especially on higher MMR, like let's say 2500. But the biggest tip I would give, it's something that Crozyr partially mentioned, is that well, you will have to play all the factions, right, if you want to stay in the pro ladder. And the best way to do that is to when you at first you have to do 40 games with each faction, but the really important thing is to not keep going with a faction that you just don't find success with, to swap to something else. If you are facing a lot of the same deck, you can think about what is good against this particular deck and try to counter it on the ladder.
That's never happened to you, has it?
Like finding a deck that I can't beat and switching.
No, somebody queuing in the counters.
To me.
No, we don't actually have to talk about that. But
okay. Well, I think I got irised once when I did play Dragon Stream. I remember. On higher MMR, it's even easier to do. I think it was Alessio who teched in Iris, or was it Camps? I don't know. On the higher ranks, you keep facing the same people. But what is really important also is to play all the factions. Like, some people tend to ignore the existence of one faction like completely. They never try it. You don't have to complete placements with it. But if you are losing to Scoia'tael a lot, let's say, for example, you should play Scoia'tael, and you will. This is the best way to learn how to beat Scoia'tael, by playing Scoia'tael yourself, realizing what's your weakness, realizing what you need to do to win the game, what your opponent has to do to stop you from winning the game. Then you will have easier time playing other factions. So don't keep going with one particular faction. Switch around, play all of them, try to stay close to peak. If you lose a lot, if you are on peak, then you lose like 2 games in a row, take a break, play something else, and you will be fine. Staying in top 500 is actually quite manageable, I would say. I think you only need at the moment it was like 9,650, something like that. So you basically need to have slightly above 50% win rate to stay.
It's about putting in the time, right?
Yeah,
you have to play your 160 games usually, because but it's just like in my situation where like I see global rank on my MMR, so it always shows what I rank on NA, but not global. So even just by completing placements, I'm not even done all my placements for Scoia'tael. I'm already in the top 100 of NA just because I'm playing more games, regardless of what the MMR is. So a lot of times just playing is enough. And the more you play, the better you get. I think anybody can attest to that. Jamoni was talking about reworking cards, not cards that are bad to play against, but cards that are just plain bad. So if we're excluding all the stuff we talked about, I think the only thing I want to address is that I think that self-wound Skellige cards are all priced too high. They're all, like, every last one of them seems like it's priced too high. Queensguard's priced too high. Elder Bear is priced too high. I mean, when you look at some of the value you can get from some other cards in some other factions, like Elder Bear is a confusing one. I know that it's better with, there's a lot of synergies with Self-Wound and synergies with actually using the Bear Master, and that's probably what it is. It just seems like, even the Dimoon Pirate feels like it's not that great. I just think that maybe they just, some of those cards are priced too high to build a deck around it reasonably with not Croc, like not a high provision point leader. Outside of that, I mean, I don't know. I'm excited for new cards. Like, thinking about reworks, I'm more interested in thinking about new cards, because if I really want to rework something, is it because I want to remove something from the game, or is it because I want to see a new effect? Because if it's just about new cards and new effects, I'll put them on the new cards, I think. But yeah, I mean, I just think that some archetypes can always just be made more viable, because more archetypes, more fun, I think. What do you guys think? This will be our last question of the day. I'll throw this one to Crozyr first.
All right. So I also think, I mean a rework is more or less get a new card, but another one's taken away from you. So I see a sentiment saying just add more cards maybe, and then tweak the ones that exist, or maybe complement the existing cards with new cards. And for Self-Wound, as you mentioned, that's something I was hoping Arniol could possibly bring when we didn't know his ability yet. I think he's a pretty cool and unique leader. I don't mind him in particular, but it's his whole lore and stuff. I really thought, oh man, we're finally gonna get a Self-Wound leader, and maybe that's somehow gonna make Self-Wound good. Who knows? Didn't quite happen yet. I mean, who knows what the expansion's gonna bring. So I'm so
and
stoked for that.
they made him doomed too. So you'd think that if they wanted to give him like a really, really high base strength and then damage him to 9, it wouldn't be that crazy because he's not going to go to the graveyard anyway and come back as like a large unit. I don't know. Like, yeah, there's tweaks that can happen, I think, to these leaders. I didn't mean to interrupt, but
yeah, and it's like not just with Skellige, but also there's just a couple of cards that just don't work yet, and I'm not sure if that type of card can ever work the way Gwent is right now. Things like John Natalis, or what's the other one, Reynard Odo, that kind of support a faction that's having some difficulties. Anyways, I guess now with me, if it's a bit with an R, but like, I mean, I'm sure there's some people in chat don't even know what they do because they haven't seen.
Reynard gives an extra charge. Yeah, Reynard gives an extra charge to every unit played with charges. And John Natalis gives all units with order played on the battlefield zeal as long as he's on the battlefield. And he's 6 strength and Reynard's 5 strength. And there was a time, I mean, when I was playing where they were like that. That is still it still demands removal, but isn't Reynard? Reynard's not. Neither of them are row based. It's the row based cards that I feel like are really hurting.
John Natalis
he's
melee
melee
locked.
locked. Yeah, so that's like a really rough one because anything that can be, if you have a high base strength and then you can just be moved or locked, it's like, you know, it's then you have to tech around that, and it's like you have to tech around unlocking him or also moving him back, and then what's your deck at that point?
Yeah, it's like it's so difficult to keep them alive, and then again it's kind of featuring into another. Really briefly, I don't want to get too much in detail with this. With like some cards like those, or even like Faultless Sprite, where it kind of feels like, okay, if they survive and if they pull off the little trick, they just insta win the game at the end. And if they don't, you just kind of lose.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's like problematic. So I'm not sure. Maybe these cards might want to see some kind of rework so that they're easier to keep alive. Because, you know, for you as the player, it's more fun to use something that's actually working instead of just dropping an order card that never goes off. But then maybe not have set like this type of ridiculous effect that's gonna insta-win the game and that requires the card to be so easily removable. That's just, I don't know, something I'm thinking about.
Like I think about a card like Dreg Bondu. Now he has a trick where he boosts all the warriors on board when you play him. He's a 6 provision card. He has a 3 strength body. His effect isn't going to win you the game when it goes off, but it's going to be good when it goes off, and it's not going to always be good when it goes off. But he only costs 6 provisions, so like I feel like that's an example of a card that does one thing that may or may not happen, but it happening isn't. Like your deck isn't hinging on it, but you can still build around it. I'm not saying that Dreg Bondu is good. In fact, Ghoul in the chat saying stuff like not enough warriors in the game as well when we're talking about, and that was probably a safety thing given that there are a lot of Skellige cards that interact with warriors. So maybe they didn't want to make anything too wild. Although, can it get more wild than Dagger? I wonder. And Hjalmar. But I think in general, like more cards that, reward build around, reward board state, but feel more like I'd rather play this in round 1 because it's bad in round 3 rather than I need to save this round 3 because if I do, I win the game. Not to say that fighting for round 1 isn't important because it's very important. Busting the myth that round 1 was not important. That was one of the old school myths of Gwent Homecoming, which I never for a second believed. Anybody who's listened to my podcast would agree. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all really excited for Gwent Open number 8. I'm going to be excited to see you again, Molegion, and I'll be talking to you soon, Crozyr, as well, and hopefully seeing you in the future as well, because you know you've proven that you have what it takes to do very, very well in qualifiers and ladder performance. So I'd like to say that, you know, it's strict, right? Pro ladder, like there's only 8 people to get into the open. The series are very long. Like the series are very long. So it's weird to think that there could ever be like 16 people in a tournament and not have it be too long of a tournament. But if in a world where more people are able to qualify for tournaments, I know that for a lot of the people like yourself, Crozyr, it's only a matter of time. So I just want to say congratulations on your performance in the qualifier, and good luck to you in the future. And Molegion, good luck to you in Gwent Open 8. As well, I wanted to ask you, for the people who want to follow you and see what you're up to, Crozyr, where can people find you out there on the internet, on Twitter, etc.?
Yeah, you can find me on as Crozyr on Twitch and as Crozyr1 on Twitter.
There we go. And wait, and how often do you stream,
Okay.
Crozier?
Oh yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. Lots of work stuff going on now. University's still a thing. So I try to stream 5 times or 6 times a week, every weekday and the weekend, besides Thursday.
But you just go live when you have the time.
Yeah, it's usually around 1 p.m. CT, but that varies wildly, greatly.
And Molegion, where can people follow you as you I was going to say as you travel to Poland, but you are already in Poland, so travel to Warsaw,
Yeah.
or are you already in? I actually forgot. Are you already in Warsaw as well?
I live in
okay,
Krakow, southern Poland. So I will take a 2 hour long train ride. It's not that long. You can find me on Twitter. That's when I'm the most active. It's TA_Molegion. Yeah, you can also find me on Twitch. From time to time I stream. From time to time I mean like every 4 months or something like that. It's Molegion with double N. And also I have recently, it happened some time ago, but I plan to be more active on YouTube. So you can find me on YouTube too. It's just Molegion.
Guys, it's thank you so much for your time. We ripped out a sweet podcast here, and I think that it's important that you should be following these players. You should be following their teams as well. Team Leviathan, brand new website. Team Aretuza have always been doing great work for Gwent content. Lots of articles and videos on both sites. Lots of movement from both teams, as well as Discords for both teams. So all of that information will be in the show notes. I suggest you get involved. These are great portals to the community and great portals to like really exciting content if you want to know what's good in the meta, deck list, articles, maybe some stuff you haven't been thinking about, and especially professional play as it's coming from these teams and these guys. So thanks again so much for coming on the podcast. I love having guests of your caliber. And yeah, that's thanks.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.
The pleasure was mine. And thanks, of course, to the chat. Thanks for throwing out the questions. Thanks for all the emote spam as well. And thanks so much for joining us today. Until next time, my friends, best of luck on the path.